Good afternoon and welcome to the San Mateo Arboretum Society's hybrid seminar, Eco-Friendly Weed Management. The program will last approximately 60 to 90 minutes and be recorded. Questions will be answered midway during the program and at the end. For those viewing on Zoom, submit your questions anytime by clicking on the chat box icon at the bottom of your screen. A few days after the presentation, you will be emailed a link to the recording and an evaluation form. Before we start, a little information about what is happening at the Arboretum Society. Our nursery in San Mateo Central Park is open Saturdays and Sundays from noon to 3. Payment is by credit or debit card, Google and Apple Pay. No cash is accepted. The nursery is staffed by volunteers and may occasionally be closed. Check our website, sanmateoarboretum.org, or call 650-579-0536, extension 2 for updated information. The Master Gardener Plant Clinic is scheduled from noon to 3 on the same day as our seminars through November. While you're in Central Park, visit the Rose Garden, Butterfly Hummingbird Garden, and our Sun and Shade demonstration gardens. All are maintained by the Arboretum Society volunteers. Today's workshop is brought to you by Flows to Bay, the San Mateo County Water Pollution Prevention Program. Our presenter today is Charlotte Canner, Qualified Integration Pest Management Advocate in association with Our Water, Our World, in collaboration with Paige from Flows to Bay. Paige is going to be viewing online. I am looking forward to learning how to keep our water safe while controlling weeds. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for the introduction. I'll start this first section and then hand it off to our wonderful presenter, Charlotte. If I could see the next slide, please.
1 second, sorry.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. So as mentioned, Flows to Bay is the San Mateo County-wide water pollution prevention program. It was established to reduce and prevent pollution carried by stormwater into local creeks, our bay, and the Pacific Ocean. We really appreciate being here today with the San Mateo Arboretum Society and our wonderful presenter, Charlotte Canner. Next slide, please. Okay, so a little bit about what we do. The program aims to educate the community and really do what we can to prevent stormwater pollution. This includes working with residents, businesses, and schools, and really getting the word out about watershed protection. Next slide. So what is a watershed? It's the land that water flows over or through on its way to a water body, such as a creek, the bay, or ocean. Essentially, it's a funnel that takes water that falls on the land and carries it to larger waterways. And every single person in the world lives in a watershed, and everything that happens in the watershed affects water quality and habitat quality for fish, birds, and other living things, such as ourselves, humans. But that's why we're here today, to be with the San Mateo Arboretum Society and our wonderful presenters, so that you know what to be aware of when it comes to actions in your yard and garden, because they really do affect our local waterways. And next slide. And real quick, just so folks kind of know the breakdown of how this happens, how everything's really connected. When rain or irrigation water falls on paved areas in your neighborhood, instead of soaking into the ground, it runs over what's called impermeable surfaces, and then that goes into the storm drain system. So San Mateo County has a separate sewer and storm drain system, and while the water in our sewer system is treated, meaning it's getting cleaned before being released into the environment, the water that flows down into the storm drains goes directly into our water bodies untreated. So there's no type of cleaning system. So that's why we're really trying to be aware and really hit it home about all the actions we do being really connected to our greater waterways and that connection with the storm drains. So with that, I'll hand it over to our wonderful instructor, Charlotte Canner.
Thank you. Thanks, Paige. I just wanted to add one thing to that last slide. The water that does leave our houses is, oops, yeah, is it does go to a treatment facility. That treatment facility is designed to take out our solid waste and bacteria and viruses and some chemicals, but most synthetic pesticides that enter the waterway from our house are not pulled out at the wastewater treatment facility. So even if we're using more toxic pesticides, synthetic pesticides in the home, we are still affecting the waterways. I just wanted to clarify that as well. But what we're going to learn today is I'll tell you a little bit about the Our Water, Our World program. We'll talk about what weeds are, how, maybe change a little perspective on weeds. We'll talk about how to identify them, prevention strategies, which it really is the best way to deal with weeds, focusing on before they even come. Some effective weed management. We'll talk about herbicides, which are the pesticides used to kill weeds. And I'll give you some resources at the end. You will also receive a PDF with lots of links, with all the links that are included in the presentation, and some other additional links as well. For those in person, there are a couple of handouts here that you're welcome to take. And for those online, just so you know what we have here, just some handouts from ourwaterourworld.org, which you can access on the website, and also some information found at the UC IPM website, which you will also all receive links to. So what is the Our Water, Our World program? Hopefully, maybe if you've been in a garden center or a hardware store in San Mateo County, you've seen some of this material. The program is designed to bring awareness between pesticides and water quality and provide pest problem solving education. We're actually a statewide program, expanding over, I think, over 280 stores across the state and growing every year. It is primarily a partnership with retailers, but of course we also love to partner with wonderful organizations like the San Mateo Arboretum and other organizations as well. So we partner with retailers to provide information at the point of sale. So if you're in a store that we partner with, you might see a rack like this with handouts. I have some handouts over here. You might also see these blue tags on the shelf. Those are going to highlight the less toxic products. So if you see those, you're going to get something that will be less harmful to you, your kids, pets, and the environment, the waterways. It's really about the water quality. And you can get all the information, all those fact sheets, more information on pesticides, and a list of all the stores that we partner with at ourwaterourworld.org. So first, I do like to start every program with just a little review of integrated pest management. Is anyone familiar with integrated pest management in this room? A couple nods, good, all right. So just a quick review, because that is how we're going to approach weeds today. So integrated pest management, or IPM, is a decision-making process, and it's always based on science. That's why we like to go to University of California, or other universities that are doing research and science-based, giving science-based information. We're not going to TikTok or Instagram for this information. And it really it's a holistic view. It looks at the garden as a whole, and that's what we're going to do today. And we ask a lot of questions when we're approaching with an IPM perspective. We're going to ask what really is the problem at hand, because we'll talk about with, not today, but other pests, aphids, any kind of other insect. Usually the problem is with the plant, and that has attracted the pest. So we've got to figure out why the plant is struggling and attracting that pest first. Usually the pest is just a symptom of the problem. So what's really the problem, and can we live with it? That's a great question to ask today when we're talking about weeds. Sometimes maybe part of the yard we can tolerate some weeds, and some part we can't. So really just always thinking about what's our threshold for dealing with weeds, for taking action. In IPM, we want to focus on prevention first, which we'll talk a lot about today. Identification. Identification of weeds can really help with weed management being more effective. But this goes for all pests, rats, mice, bugs, everything. We want to know what we're dealing with before we take action, because if we know what we're dealing with and we can understand its habitat, how its life cycle, what it needs, we can use that information to better manage the pest. Then we're going to take our action steps if we decide, we know what we have and we do want to deal with it. It's, it's causing too much of a problem. We do want to take action. There are 4 kinds of action steps in IPM called controls. Cultural controls is really focusing on the health of the garden or the home, sanitation, always a good, like a cultural control. You're really just focusing on making it the best environment for you and your plants and your home, and a less good environment for that pest, depending on what it is. Mechanical controls, which are traps, barriers, and tools. Biological controls, which would be utilizing garden allies and other living organisms to manage pests for us. And then chemical controls, which are pesticides. In IPM, we always use them as a last resort, and some people choose not to use them at all, and that is perfectly okay. But we always want to go for the less toxic strategies first, the less toxic chemical controls first, and then, yeah, always as a last resort. Oops, I have to remember to, oops, oh, thank you. I have to advance both of them simultaneously, so it might mess me up a little bit, but all right. So remember what is okay, so we're going to focus on IPM for weeds. A weed is a plant that has mastered every survival skill except to learn how to grow in rows. So, the weed definition for weeds can change depending on the person, but generally I would say it's something that can grow quickly without a lot of something can be very weedy, like mint, for example. It grows like crazy. Some people might think that's a weed. Some people might, it's not, because it's a useful plant. So again, just changing our perspective. So we're going to focus today on identification, prevention, early detection, and removal. And again, what is a weed? A weed is a plant growing in an undesirable place. So these examples here, chard, kale, borage, these were all volunteers this is not my garden, but my colleague's garden. They were all volunteers. They just popped up. So technically they were weeds. They weren't growing where she intended them to be, but does that make them bad? No. Maybe she'll keep the chard and kale. Maybe she won't if she wants to make room for the other things. Borage, of course, beautiful plant for pollinators, attracting pollinators. So, and I believe it's edible, or you can make tea out of it too. So again, we want to understand, what are we looking at? Do we want it there? Is it a problem? Is it not? And then I do want to share that, again, not all weeds are bad. Other ways, I was going to open this up to the audience, although I did mention a couple. What are ways, you on Zoom too, what are some ways that weeds can be beneficial or not bad for the garden? Any suggestions? Any thoughts? I don't know if anyone has anything online.
It can help with pest management section. Some of them might have some ways that would help for something that you may not want.
Yeah, yeah, it can help with, sometimes they can help with pest management. A lot of weeds are, sometimes weeds are the only flowering plant during the winter. And so they're feeding pollinators and other beneficial insects. So yeah, there's a lot of weeds out there that do feed pollinators and beneficials, and then they can help with pest management. Did you have a question?
How about, do weeds help soil? If you plant something here and then a weed pops up, would it be helping the soil for the plant that was planting there?
That depends on the 2 plants. Maybe sometimes, certain weeds could be like legume type weeds, and they can feed the soil.
Yeah.
I would say weeds do help soil in that soil really likes to be covered. I would say personally, my perspective, because I love soil and talking about building soil, I think it would be better to have weeds growing than bare soil. So because weeds do protect soil. And any kind of living root in the soil is always feeding the soil organisms. So again, better than bare soil for sure.
You have some comments online.
Oh yeah. Weeds often arrive to restore compacted, low nutrient soil and soil lacking organic matter, exactly. Adding nitrogen, attracting pollinators, excellent. Purslane is edible, totally. There's one other point too, that, if you get them early and often, which we'll talk about, you can chop them down, and as long as they haven't gone to seed, they're just green, fresh matter that you can put in your compost pile. So you'll have a lot more nitrogen material to add to your compost pile. So that's one way to look at it too. All right, thank you for your input on that one. I won't put you all on the spot too many times today. I'll show you this again later, and we were actually just using this tool outside with the master gardeners just now. There is a tool at UCIPM called the Weed Photo Gallery. There is kind of a tool so you can narrow down what you're looking at, look at different pictures of weeds. So this is going to help you identify what you're looking at and will help you with the management. So we're going to use that tool to identify our weeds, and we're going to get to know our weeds. We want to know more about them, how they grow. So we are going to understand their life cycle. Are they annual weeds? This means they sprout from seeds and they grow, flower, and spread seeds and die within 1 year. Biennial weeds also sprout from seeds, but they live 2 years. So they'll overwinter for 1 year, and in the second year they'll go to flower and seed and then reseed themselves again. And then there's perennial weeds, which are the hardest ones to get rid of for sure, because they can have really deep root systems and spread. They can spread from seed, but they spread also through their underground parts, whether that's tubers, corms, like underground stems, roots. Those are, and they could just live year after year. It's surprising that oxalis is actually a perennial weed, because it really only comes up once a year and then it dies back in the spring when it gets hot again. But oxalis comes from I think it's corm. I don't know if that's the actual, I know there's different words for different underground parts, but basically a bulb or a corn, an underground like kind of nut thing. That's where they come from. So they kind of they die back. They live in the soil until the conditions are right for them to come back. So even though it only might come up once, a year, they could still be perennial weeds. So again, we're going to learn how these weeds reproduce, and that's going to help us prevent growth and spread. Also, we want to understand when we're going to see them. I'm very obsessed with oxalis because it's the main problem in my yard. Oxalis is a cool rainy season. You'll notice it pops up the first rain of the winter. Pops up right away. It survives throughout the winter, and then once it gets much warmer and drier, it will die back. But chickweed and other grasses tend to be cool or rainy season weeds. And then the warm summer season are annual purslane, mallow, crabgrass, and perennial bindweed.
Sorry, there was a comment that
Oh.
was corms.
Oh, it's corms. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so now once we know what we're looking at, we know how they grow, we're going to change the environment to be less beneficial for them. So we also, so anyway, we're going to adjust the environment to make them less desirable. That's a cultural control. And that same perspective can be applied to almost any, pest, whether it's rats, spider mites, anything like that. So we're just going to change the environment to benefit us and not the pest. So again, we are going to look at the soil. Acidic soil will attract certain plants, certain weeds, sorrel, dandelion, plantain, stinging nettle, and then more alkaline soil will, other plants grow better in that. So chicory, Queen Anne's lace, salad, burnet. And then the quality of the soil can affect what grows in it too. If it's nutrient poor soil, mugwort, thistle, vetch, sheep soil, and yarrow, which I consider a beautiful native plant that we want to grow around to attract pollinators, grows like a weed though, so kind of it's crossing over into multiple categories there, I guess. And then nutrient-rich soil with lots of organic matter will attract different weeds, chickweed, purple dead nettle, lamb's quarters, and purslane. So what we can do when we see this, we can understand what their needs are. We can maybe, if we want, we can change the soil. So we can make it more acidic by adding sulfur or bringing down the pH. Or we can add lime to make it more alkaline. Of course, we want to make sure we're conscious of the other plants in the area, that we don't want to change it too much to affect their needs as well. And then if it's nutrient poor soil, we're going to add compost, organic matter, organic fertilizer. If it's nutrient rich soil, I wouldn't change too much about it because that's a great thing to have. But there's maybe ways we can manage that too. I actually don't really know how I would manage a nutrient rich soil and make it less rich, because that would be sad personally. Maybe we can, stop adding as much compost, I guess. Then we're going to look at the irrigation and drainage. Weeds that grow in wet or poor draining soil are dock, chickweed, and purple loosestrife. And again, these are just like a couple of examples. Weeds that grow in dry soil, mullein, mustard, and thistle. So we can adjust our irrigation or our drainage to change that. If it's wet, poor draining soil, we're going to add maybe more mineral material to increase the drainage. If it's really dry, maybe we'll increase the organic matter to hold on to more moisture, use mulch, or increase irrigation. And then weeds that grow in hard, compact soil, also dock, field mustard, thistle, quackgrass. We can, try to break up that soil. Though to someone's point earlier, I think, weeds growing in hard, compact soil, I would say is pretty helpful, because I know how hard it is to grow into clay. And, if we're having these like deep-rooted perennial weeds to help us break it up, that's actually going to be really helpful for us. Either way, but we do want to add organic matter to that. So we're going to amend the soil, improve drainage and water holding capacity, maybe aerate or aerate the soil to reduce compaction. Oops. And then we are going to also focus on how the weeds got there. Sometimes we won't know. It's, just in the air, wind, things like that. But if we know how it got there, maybe we can reduce that risk, reduce those weeds traveling from, place to place. So if you're going hiking, you can maybe potentially bring weeds into your garden. So, you come home from a hike, immediately put those clothes in the washer before you head out to the garden. Lawnmower equipment or other equipment from hired gardeners can bring in weeds from other yards. So you can either talk to them about cleaning the equipment, or just, have your own equipment for them to use in your own yard. It can just come in by wind. We can't really stop that that much. But then potted plants, sometimes things come in from the garden center. They're usually pretty good about keeping weeds out of their potting soil, but sometimes it happens. Pets too, same as like, coming in from a hike. Weed seeds can get on pets' paws or fur and then come into your yard. And then of course, birds and wildlife can bring in some seeds as well. And then, oops, sorry, I keep doing that. Okay, and then we do, so again, I'm a big soil person. I've done talks on soil and how to build healthy soil. So I do like to focus on that. And reducing disturbance of the soil is actually a great way, just in general, to have healthier soil, but it is also a great way to reduce weeds and prevent more weeds from growing. A lot of times there's weed seeds or underground parts in the soil, but maybe the conditions are not quite right. They're too deep, they're not getting the sun or the moisture. But when we disturb the soil by either digging or rototilling, we can bring those seeds up to the surface or at more at a level where they want to be. And then the conditions will be better for those weed seeds to germinate. So I recommend reducing, all disturbance to the soil or keeping it to really minimal, like only where you're planting. It just creates better soil health and soil structure in general. And then, of course, it can also reduce weeds germinating. The next couple of slides is all about like focusing on covering your soil too. And this is a really fun one. A great way to prevent weeds is to just plant plants that you actually want growing. If you have more plants that you want in the garden growing, you are going to outcompete the weeds. They're going to shade areas so that there's less weed germination. And there's going to be less space too for those weeds to be, germinating between them. And it looks better. And then, if you do have a space that, you're not going to actively grow in, but you don't want it to get all weedy, I do recommend using cover crops. Cover crops are kind of just like, they're like lower cost plants. They're kind of just planted for the sake of growing them. A lot of them add nitrogen to soil. They can be pollinator attractors for your beneficial insects. They can have nice flowers. And they keep the soil covered. Again, covered soil is happier soil. It's going to help with soil organisms, your soil health, keep protecting it from wind and rain. And, again, out competing those weeds as well. And a really wonderful way that I love to talk about, a great way to prevent weeds is mulching, and I'll later talk about sheet mulching as well, which is another just kind of a more intense version of mulching. But mulch is amazing, a great way, start now before the rain comes, get a nice thick layer, fresh layer of mulch on your soil. It's going to protect that soil, wood bark and wood chips, adds nutrients to the soil as it breaks down. It saves water and reduces evaporation. It reduces soil compaction and erosion, keeps that soil in place. But most importantly, at least today, that we're talking about, it prevents weeds from germinating because it's really protecting that soil. So it's suppressing the weed seeds that are in the soil. They're protecting them from getting the moisture and the sunlight that they might want, and reducing the area where weed seeds can land and grow. Drip irrigation. I'll just share also, we have like 2 more slides and then we'll break for questions. Drip irrigation is really a wonderful tool to, again, create an environment that's going to benefit you and not the weeds, because it allows for efficient, localized, and deep watering. We're only getting the water where we want it to be, so where the plants that we want need it. We will be, we're not just spraying water all over the place. That's going to be more beneficial because, this place in between the plants will be drier, so less enticing, less of a good environment for those weed seeds. So we're only going to focus that water on the plants that we want to get water. And drip irrigation in general just makes for more efficient watering. And it's like can be very deep watering, which is better, healthier plants. So just to review our culture, those are all cultural controls, changing the environment to benefit us, not benefit the weeds. So we're going to adjust pH and fertilizing. We're going to amend the soil. We'll talk to our gardeners about using our own mowing equipment or cleaning it, reduce soil disturbance, and keep our soil covered whichever way we can. And then apply mulch, or just like a wood chips or straw can be used. And we're going to only water the planted areas. So before we move on to other controls, I'll pause for maybe a couple questions if there are any. I'll give a moment for the people on Zoom can ask. Yeah.
Rocks good to protect the soil, like the small,
like gravel.
well, gravel or white rocks, for kind of decoration.
I would repeat that question. Oh yeah, sorry, I will. Yeah, so they asked, are like white rocks or gravel type beneficial for covering the soil? So, I would say that there is some benefit to using rocks. It's not, you won't get as many benefits as using an organic mulch like wood chips or bark, but it's still, I mean, for decoration, I would say it still increases water permeability. It's better than a hardscape like a concrete, so water can still infiltrate. You're not necessarily going to get like the lack of, like the protection against compaction or adding nutrients, but if it is still going to be a great way to create a walking path for sure. Yeah, you're not gonna get, yeah, I guess you're not gonna get as many benefits as an organic mulch, but it is better than a hardscape. How's that? Yeah. Do you have a question?
Yeah, in the rose garden here at the Arboretum, we use from Lisa arbor mulch, which is a mix of various different woods.
Okay.
And it's what Terry Lingso has highly recommended, and we found it's very good.
Okay, great. And I can repeat that for those if you didn't hear. Suzanne's just recommended that Lingso in, I think they're in San Mateo, right? They
San Carlos.
San Carlos, thank you. They sell an arbor mulch, which is a mix between like bark and wood chips kind of.
Yeah.
And it's been really beneficial for the rose garden. Do you have a question? Yeah.
I was just wondering, San Mateo seems very dry after COVID-19. Do weeds do better in wet or dry? And do weeds are better in plants or lawn? Do you find more or less with the wet and dry and lawn versus plants?
Weeds generally do better in wet conditions, but as we looked at before, there are some that prefer like the cooler, wet climate, and then some that actually come out like during the summer and can do better in the summer with less water. So again, it depends on the weed. Some will benefit the drier and some not. Like I know the weeds went crazy this last winter with all the rain, a lot of grasses. But yeah, again, it depends on the weed. Some prefer both. Yeah.
Is San Mateo more dry than other places you have been? Do you think this is a good place for growing gardens and?
I mean, I think I don't live in San Mateo, I live in San Francisco. I think that this coastal climate is amazing because you can grow all year round. And while California has dry summers, there are ways to capture that water that comes during the winter, hopefully, and use it and then just plant smart throughout the year. So, natives, Mediterranean plants that are going to do well in this environment, utilizing soil amendments, mulch, drip irrigation to water deeply and keep as much water in the soil as possible. So there's ways to, it's not like, you're not going to get the same plants as you might get like in the Midwest or on the East Coast, but you can do really beautiful things here for sure. I'm sure. I mean, just look out there. It's gorgeous here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question on what's your experience with using organic mulch to prevent weeds from coming out? Like how thick realistically the layer needs to be for it to be effective?
Great.
I had mixed results and had to go back to cardboard
Yeah.
and then cover it
Yeah.
up with mulch, otherwise.
Yeah. So the question was, what's the experience using organic mulch, and like how deep you need? What you mentioned, and they also mentioned using cardboard also, and I would say I'm going to talk about sheet mulching in a few slides. I actually don't know why I didn't already talk about it, but whatever. I do recommend using, if you're going to get rid of weeds or if your goal is to really suppress weeds, I do recommend adding cardboard underneath an organic mulch because it just adds that extra layer. You can use just organic mulch, but it's just gonna break down faster and weeds could come up eventually. I always do recommend using at least 3 inches of mulch at any time, like just if you're just putting it in for like to prevent evaporation. 3 inches is 2 to 3 inches is a good amount to start with, and then adding that couple layers of cardboard underneath that is going to add like even an extra layer. I did sheet mulching in my yard for oxalis, because that's all I had. I had basically had this big like bare section, and every year it would be just like a field of oxalis, which is fine, it's pretty, it's green, whatever, but I just didn't really want that. So I put 3 layers of cardboard down, all overlapping, that I got free from neighbors on Craigslist. And then I put 3 inches of mulch on top, and it did, oxalis comes, I'd say I got 2 or 2 winters without any oxalis popping through, but as it broke down, some does come through, but you can pull it a lot easier when it comes through that. Does that answer your question, kind of? Yeah. It's not, you're not, I mean, it doesn't sound like you're doing anything wrong, it's just some weeds just will come up through, but they come up, they're a lot easier to pull when they come up through mulch, for sure. Any questions from the Zoom, or we can move on? Okay.
I think Paige gave the website.
Oh, great.
Just for myself.
All right, we'll move on then. Thank you for the questions. So next is mechanical controls. And unfortunately, when people ask me what's the best way to get rid of weeds, besides preventing them in the beginning, is hand pulling. No one wants to hear that, but physical labor and physically removing them is the best way to do it. But there are a lot of ways. It doesn't literally have to be your hands on your hands and knees pulling every single weed. There are a lot of tools that you can use to make it easier. I do have some tools on the table for those in person. Here, I can lift up a couple. I don't know the names for all these. This is a Hori Hori. I love this tool. This is actually an awesome tool. It has like a little prong on the top. I love this one for getting between cracks. And as we were talking before, this is actually not a weeding tool. I think my partner just got it from a hardware store and was like, "Oh, that'll help me." So, because my partner's a maintenance gardener. Anyway, hey, any tool that helps you get into the cracks and get into those weeds, just go for it. And then off camera, we have 2 kinds of hose, a hula hoe, which I'll show on the next screen. A hula hoe is the one in the middle. And that can just kind of be used to chop weeds right off the top, like just the top of the weed, either in cracks and crevices or on, the soil surface. And then there's another similar, what did you call it?
It's a colander hole.
Colander hoe.
Colander hole.
Okay.
Right from Peaceful Valley Farm.
Okay, Peaceful Valley Farm. I'm just gonna hold it up to the camera if people want to look at it. It's like a blade on a long handled stem. And it's similar to the hula hoe in that it slices the plants right off at the soil surface. So the point is that there's a lot of tools out there. Find the ones that work for you. There's even tools made specifically for specific weeds. For example, this one on the left is the dandelion weeding tool. I guess there's a specific one for that. You can see in the lower left, it's pulling off a dandelion. So have fun, explore the different options. There's also heavy duty weed pullers, which hopefully none of you need, but they're potentially available for rent, so you don't have to invest in one. I know these can be used to pull out Scotch broom, which is really challenging to get rid of. But yeah, there really are tools for every type of weed. And then there's weed torches. So again, you don't have to be pulling or scraping every single thing. There's other ways, other tools that we can use to manage. So weed torch is great for between cracks and gravel in walkways. It's not burning the weed. It's just heating it up so that the cell walls just burst and then it dies. So we're not burning. And they can be pretty economical as well. And we're only using these during the rainy season, of course, because even though it's not burning, we don't want to accidentally light any. We're not using this on dry weeds. We are using this on green, fresh weeds, and hopefully the earlier, the better, and only during the rainy season because we don't want to accidentally catch anything on fire.
the comment that
Oh.
dandelion.
Dandelion greens are so delicious early in the season, and the flowers are often the first food for bees and other valuable insects. If you can leave them. I have taught myself to love them. Plus, I don't have a lawn to keep perfect. Yes. Great point. Thank you, Darshana, for that. Exactly. We have to, remember that, not all weeds are bad, and some of them are very beautiful. So again, just changing your perspective on them. Oh, can you click on this? Yeah. Similarly, weed steamers, similar to weed torches. I'm not sure if it's as easy to get a weed steamer on the market, but you might be able to have a professional come, or you might be able to rent one. They're more commercial use, but similar idea. You're heating the plant cells so that they burst and die, and then the plant material, the plant will die. And it's just the surface. It's not getting the roots. But you're gonna have, you're just killing off the surface. All of these tools, everything I'm gonna talk about today is better the earlier, the sooner you get it. When they first pop up, when they're younger weeds, they're weaker. So anything you can do, I'm telling you now in September, so you can prevent the weeds throughout the winter. And then, in January, February, March, you start seeing a lot more weeds come up, hopefully with some rain. You can get them right away. Don't just wait till May to get out there and have to tackle this big old mess. Start early and often, and it'll be a lot easier throughout the year. So I'm gonna say that like 8 more times today. But any of these tools, it will be easier for you to get when they're when they're younger. Because they don't really kill the roots. They will just kill the top unless you dig out the root. They'll only kill but the more you disrupt the above ground parts, the weaker the root system will get. And so if you keep cutting it off, cutting it down, disturbing the weeds any way you can, cutting it, smushing it, heating it, pouring boiling water on it, whatever, it weakens it and it keeps trying to grow back, eventually it will give up. It will run out of energy. So just early and often. Oh.
I was just gonna say, we had a problem in the rose garden with wild onions.
Yeah.
And we hardly have any anymore. And it was just by using the colander hoe and cutting off the top and just depleting the energy.
Excellent.
Bulb.
Great, real life solution here, or example here, just getting those green onions early and often. I have onions in my yard. For some reason, I hate them. And what was that?
They're pretty.
They can be pretty. They have white flowers, yeah, but for some reason, I don't know. There's some plants that it's a personal thing. I'll take your questions.
Okay, so does that say the whole just, breaking off the nutrient system to the roots work with bindweed? Because I can't get rid of it in my yard. And I know it goes down about 30, the roots go down around 30 feet.
Yeah.
So I can't dig them out ever. And I'm always pulling the top of them out. I don't let them die back.
Yeah.
But I keep getting more and more of them every year.
I don't have, she's asking about bindweed. Forget me not. Is that really, are they the
Morning
same?
glory.
Yeah.
Oh, morning glory, yeah.
Morning
I
glory.
have bindweed in my yard as well. I don't have a magical solution besides what you're doing is, I know the roots, they spread all over. I mean, it is the same with like blackberry. Blackberry just spreads like crazy. I guess I would, if you can find the source of like for blackberry, you'd want to find like the source of it, but it really with those perennial weeds, it's just being really good about cutting them down as soon as possible, mulching over the area if possible. And just making it harder for them. That's integrated pest management, is making life hard for the pest, making it life really unpleasant for the pest. Anyway,
I have had some plants that I didn't want that I killed that way because they were too big to really dig out or anything. And maybe take several years, but eventually they die.
Yeah. I don't have a magical solution for bindweed, I'm sorry. We can look it up at in the UCIPM weed gallery after and see if we can find some solution, but I don't think there is a magical solution, unfortunately. All right, one more mechanical control. Actually, no, there's a couple more. Line trimmers and mowers, can mow your weeds. It's pretty easy to just, cut them all down real quick with a lawnmower. Again, if we're using a weed whacker or a mower, we're getting them as early as possible. Once the plants go to seed, we really don't want to use these tools because they just send seeds everywhere and they just, fly around. And then of course that material is also on the mower. So wherever you use it, spreading it. But again, you don't have to be on your hands and knees. You can use tools. You can also use animals. Goats are really great for, clearing a whole area. You can hire goats for clearing areas of brush and weeds. I personally don't know of any names of companies. I know there is a herd in San Francisco. I see them sometimes on a little hillside. It's really cute. Great way to, do a lot of, clear a whole area and get some fertilizer too on the soil and, have something cute to look at. Oh wow, Darshana's really helping today. They commented on bindweed here. Bindweed can grow back from any tiny bit of root material, so it's important to dig carefully. Each bit makes a new plant. And covering with cardboard and mulch consistently, catching any that comes up at the edge and getting all the root parts out. That's kind of what I did in my yard, and it still comes up here and there, but I just kind of tolerate some of it. Sorry. And then they also say grazing goats in San Francisco. They have a Facebook page. All right. Thank you. As I mentioned before, sheet mulching is a tool. It's both a tool and a cultural control. We're adding cardboard and then 3 to 4 inches of mulch on top. Cardboard is so easy to get for free from your neighbors. Just go on Craigslist or Nextdoor. People always have tons of it. And then mulch can be, you can buy pretty mulch like from Linkso, for example. But some places do have, might be able to even find free mulch with like an arborist. What is that? There's an app that connects arborists with people who want mulch. And I apologize, I forgot what it is. Maybe someone, Chip Drop, thank you, Chip Drop. That's what it's called. There's an app. So you can see if there's an arborist in the area that has a bunch of, it's better for them because they don't have to pay for dumping it. And then you can get that. So I would write that down because I don't have that on my resource list, but thank you. And then sheet mulching is great also just for removing a lawn, just so you know, like if you want to remove a lawn or an area, part of a lawn, you can just put mulch, cardboard right on top and then mulch on top. You don't have to do anything to the lawn. You don't have to dig it out. Just smush it down with that cardboard. The lawn will die back, fertilize the soil. And then you can also plant right directly in it. Just cut a hole in the cardboard and plant right in there. Someone said, oh yeah, Darshana also says better to remove plastic tape from the cardboard and the labels. And you can buy rolls of cardboard. Absolutely. If you want to just buy a roll, it's a lot easier to apply it. I've done that before too, instead of going around to your neighbors. Yeah, if you can get as much of the tape off as possible, you don't have to be like super militant about it, but it does break down and become microplastics in the soil. So whatever you can get off is going to be better. And speaking of microplastics, I do just want to share a warning about landscape fabrics. I personally don't really recommend them for a few reasons. They are made of harmful chemicals. If you want to move to another seat, you can. It looks like you're stuck in there a little bit there. You're gonna get a sunburn. They are made of like plastics, petroleum materials, so they do break down in the soil and can add those materials, those chemicals, those microplastics to the soil. They actually can cause soil compaction because they reduce airflow and water getting to the soil. They can prevent weeds in the short term, but eventually weeds will make it through that material, and then it gets really complicated because there's weeds coming through the fabric, there's weeds growing on top of the fabric. From personal experience, I can tell you it's a real mess and not really fun. So it's also expensive, whereas cardboard is potentially free. It can cause harm to existing plants because it's reducing airflow and water getting to those plants. And if you have irrigation, it can make fixing your irrigation very challenging. And again, it breaks down over time. Yes, this previous owner of my house added landscape fabric everywhere, and weeding has become so much more difficult as a result. So there's a first person experience there. So when we're dealing with the weeds, we're going to look at our annual and biennial weeds. We're going to hand pull them or disturb them just as they have emerged. We're going to hoe when the soil is dry. So I know last year was very wet all the time. So if the soil does get dry, we're going to go out there and hoe them or pull them. We don't really want to step on wet soil because we don't want compaction. We can use a weed torch or steamer during the rainy season, and we want to get them early so that they don't go to seed and spread more seeds around. For those perennial weeds, we're going to dig them out, pull them, cut them down, anything to make them weaker, disturb them, mow them, use a weed torch or steamer, smother them with sheet mulching, and again, we're also avoiding them, letting them go to seed. Some tips for weeding is just start small, prioritize the weeds. So if you have a big yard, focus on the areas that you spend the most time in and that you look at most of the time. Don't go to the back corner and tackle a whole grassy area. That could just be, chopped with like a line trimmer, but really just start small, pick a small area, take a before and after photo for some inspiration. Spend an hour, put a podcast in or some music on, whatever you want, and just start small and prioritize where you want to work on first. You can have a weeding party, make lunch, have your friends come over, have some good, get some exercise while you're chit-chatting. Any way to make it fun. You're gonna also make sure we're not putting weeds with seeds or diseases into the compost pile. If you have one, I'd recommend, to be safe, just put them in the early in the season. They haven't gone to seed. It's okay to chop anything chopped from the top. You can use that as green material in your compost pile. Later in the season, where there might be weeds, or if we've added any of those underground parts like from oxalis, don't risk it. It's not worth spreading it through your compost pile. It is, no offense, but it's unlikely your backyard compost is going to get hot enough to kill weed seeds. So just put it in the green bin and let the big composters deal with it. They'll get it hot enough. And then we also want to make sure we don't plant a pest, which I'll cover in just a second. Weeds in turf areas too. I know this is a problem we have our lawn, we want it to look beautiful. There are ways to prevent and deal with weeds in our lawn without resorting to chemicals. Biggest thing is focus on the health of the lawn. If we have healthy turf grass with deep roots, you're gonna have that actually is gonna outcompete any weed seeds. And also when we're watering deeply, we're gonna water at least 6 inches down, get that water at least 6 inches down to make those roots nice and deep. And then we're gonna let the soil dry out an inch or two between waterings. That is actually gonna that's actually gonna make it a less desirable environment for those weed seeds, because we've dried out the top 2 inches or so. And that makes those weeds, suffer a bit. They don't have that water for their shallow roots. But the turf grass will still have their water if we're watering deeply. We can, yeah, so we're gonna avoid overwatering, you know, just a couple minutes every day is shallow watering. We're gonna go for longer periods of watering, not as often. And I can't tell you how often to water your lawn, depends on your specific situation. Yeah,
I have a friend whose nephew put in some sort of system for a lawn and to measure whatever, but it's all done. You can see it on a computer. And so you just water it just enough for what the, I can't explain it.
okay.
Really, I thought it was
Okay.
totally cool.
Very-
You're not guessing how much
Yeah.
water it is.
Yeah.
It measures the moisture
Yeah.
and what, and like the dirt.
Okay.
It was pretty amazing.
Cool. Well, there are ways to, you know, to be more technical. You can get a moisture meter, stick it down into the soil. Once you learn, you know, what parts of the lawn maybe absorb water faster or slower, if there's like a dip, you can adjust with, you can adjust your timer. And but I think a common mistake is people just, you know, they water too little, so it just sinks in the top inch or two, and they do it too often. They do it like every day. So we really, I could talk a whole thing about watering. I'm not going to do that, but the amount we water depends on wind, sun, you know, slope, soil, what the plant is. Like, there's a lot of factors. So it really takes some observation. That sounds like your friend's son did. Observe, feel the soil, and then you'll understand what deep, less frequent watering is. But people always ask me how often. I can't tell them that. We do have a quick question from the Zoom. I'm curious about what weeds I can put in municipal compost. Can invasives be put in there? Yeah, you can put anything, any green material in the municipal compost. They get, their compost reaches a certain temperature for a long period of time, which kills infections, disease, bacteria, things like that. Okay, so sorry, I'm gonna keep going. We'll save the rest of the questions for the end. We can also adjust the mow height depending on the season. Higher in the summer will shade out the weed seeds that are in the lawn so they won't germinate. Shorter in the winter, that is not for weed prevention. That is just because there's less sunlight, so we want the grass and the top layer of soil to dry out to reduce fungal diseases. We're going to make sure our lawn is aerated. We can, if we do take out, weeds by hand, we're going to make sure we fill it in quickly with a bunch more seed and get that watered in and growing quickly. We're going to use organic fertilizers, and if you mow and you can leave the clippings, that's especially if they're chopped up nice and small, that can be a great way to just keep fertilizing your lawn. And I mentioned earlier, don't plant a pest. So a lot of times nurseries do still sell plants that are considered invasive species. Sometimes it's hard to understand why something is considered invasive, but they have their parameters. For example, sweet alyssum is sold at all garden centers, and it's a beautiful plant. It spreads very easily. So that's, I think, why it's considered invasive, but it is a really wonderful plant for attracting pollinators and like ladybugs to the garden. So yeah, anyway, if you don't want to plant a pest, don't plant an invasive species. There are some very, very problematic ones. So you can go to the California Invasive Plant Council, and they have a campaign called Plant Right, which will give you some information on like alternatives to whatever you might want to plant. And those links are on the handout that you'll get later. All right, lastly, we're going to talk about chemical controls. And yeah, I see. Thank you for bearing with me for a whole hour. So hopefully we're almost done. We're going to talk chemical controls. If you choose to use a pesticide, we want to learn about them, understand them, how to use them. So herbicides are the pesticides that kill weeds and plants. There's lots of different kinds. We're gonna start by reading the label. We're going to look at the, oh, actually I can use this handy tool here. The active ingredients, that's how what our world decides if something's, less toxic for the environment. We look at the active ingredient. We're not looking at the label or, the manufacturer. It's all about the active ingredients and sometimes the other ingredients as well. If you don't know what that active ingredient is, that's okay. Totally understandable. I am giving you a resource on if you want to look it up. But hopefully if you're in a store that we partner with, you'll have that blue tag that says eco-friendly products, so you won't need to look it up. And then we're also going to look at this word here, caution. Sometimes it's danger, sometimes it's warning. This is gonna give you an idea of how careful you need to be with this product. And there will always be instructions on how to apply and what to do if it goes wrong. Then we're going to always read the label. All pesticides have a very long and thorough label that you really should read before you even buy the product. And definitely read it before you apply it. It tells you, well, we'll go over this in a second. Oops, okay, good. Directions for use. Whoops, oh gosh, what am I doing? Okay, here we go. Directions for use. Up here, we're going to shake well. This product is a contact, non-selective, broad spectrum foliar applied grass and weed killer. It's a lot of words that we'll talk about vocabulary on the next slide. But I just want to say contact means it needs to come in contact with the plant tissue. Non-selective, meaning it will kill anything, any plant material that it comes in contact with. Broad spectrum, it kills a lot of different types of plant material, which is basically all of them at this point. And then foliar applied, meaning it needs to be applied to the leaves. So it's like, it has to come in contact with outside. It's not going to be a systemic type of pesticide. Then we have, oops. More about it. It kills many types of weed and grasses. This product that we're looking at now is an alternate solution to synthetic grass and weed killers. It does not translocate, meaning it's not moving systemically throughout the plant material. It's just a contact kill. Says that it's rainproof when dry, so we're never applying when there's rain in the forecast within 48 hours. And it's people and pet safe when used as directed. This is really key. Even eco-friendlies can be harmful if they are not applied according to the label. So if we're applying things according to the label, they're going to be pet and people safe. And that goes for all products. Down here, over here, it talks about which plants that can be, this product can be applied on. And then the precautionary statements. Caution means, it causes eye irritation, so you want to wear your PPE. It does don't get it into eyes or on skin or on clothing. It's harmful if swallowed, and what to do if it does get into your eyes. Environmental hazards, avoid spraying directly into waterways. So it could be a potential waterway, a problem for waterways if we're spraying it directly into water, which we're not likely doing that because that's not what the directions are going to tell us to do. But other than that, it can be used safely and less toxic to the environment. So again, I've kind of touched on some, language. Narrow spectrum or selective means it only kills a few closely related organisms. For example, in the weed killer, this would be like a lawn weed killer, only kills broadleaf weeds, not grasses. So this is used on your lawn. It won't kill your lawn, but it'll kill the broadleaf pest in your lawn. Broad spectrum, non-selective, it kills a large range of pests and non-target organisms. Contact means it has to come in contact with the external surface of the target organism, like plant. Systemic or translocated would mean that it needs to be absorbed. So it takes a little bit longer, absorbed usually through the soil up through the roots and throughout the whole plant. Pre-emergent means that this would be a preemptive weed control before the weeds emerge. And this will inhibit weed seeds from sprouting or emerging from the soil. I don't know a ton, I will be honest, I don't know a ton about pre-emergence because there's very few on the market. I know there's one less toxic option made from like corn gluten. I don't know how to, you'll have to read about it, how to work it, but I know that all pre-emergence, whether eco-friendly or not, do require specific instructions, like you're not supposed to disturb that area for when it's applied, because that like breaks the seal, I guess, of protecting the soil. I don't know if that makes any sense. I don't really know that much about it, but that's what I've heard about. Read the label is the idea there. Yes, Deepika says preen. Preen has a preen natural. They have a they have a more toxic option, but they also have one that's made from corn gluten. And then we have post-emergent, which is most of the things we've talked about today. Tools, you know, mulching, all of this is, well, not mulching, I guess, but the tools, the weed torches, everything that's post-emergent after the weeds have already emerged from the soil. Timing for application is really important. Some herbicides will kill weeds pretty quickly. And others can take up to a week or more if they're like the systemic translocated ones. And then some often need to be reapplied. They might, you know, weaken the plant. They'll spray like they'll affect the plant over a few days, and then maybe the plant can kind of come back a bit, so it'll need reapplication. Some pesticides can persist in plants and soil for long periods of time. So if you have applied a more toxic weed killer to an area, and then you want to go and plant in that area, please know that that product might still be in the soil. You should, I don't know how long each product lasts in the soil, but you can read more about that active ingredient and learn how long it will last and maybe ways to mitigate that. But if you're using a less toxic, more eco-friendly product, they break down much quicker in the environment, so you don't have to wait as long. Similarly, some active ingredients move through soils into groundwater. Those are more the synthetic products, whereas eco-friendlies break down quickly and won't cause harm to waterways. We're always going to spray when there is no wind or less wind, very little wind, and there's no rain in the forecast. This will reduce overspray, getting the spray on plants that we don't want to actually spray. And also note that herbicides tend to work better in warmer temperatures. Suzanne and I were talking earlier about like an oil-based one, especially. So above 50 degrees is usually better, and warmer the better, especially those oil-based ones. If we have oil on a plant, well, the sun plus oil on a plant will burn the plant, which is why we don't apply neem oil and horticultural oil when the sun's out. But that might help us with this herbicide as well. And remember, all herbicides might require reapplication. No pesticide is risk-free, including the eco-friendlies. So understand the unintended consequences of herbicide use, even DIY pesticides, which we'll talk about in a second. Drift can cause damage to non-targeted plants. For example, this was a rosebud that was accidentally sprayed with pesticide when it was first forming, and now it's all deformed. Of course, we can cause contamination to soil and groundwater if we're improperly applying it or overusing it. Some pesticides can cause damage to soil microbes. And remember that more is not better. While you might need reapplication, we're not overusing it during application. And then I just want to talk about DIY weed killers, because I know a lot of people want to go the less toxic way, and they think that maybe they can use some stuff from their kitchen. I just want to share that I don't usually recommend DIY solutions. For the most part, a lot of stuff that we might use not tested. We don't know how the risks of it mixing the products are. We don't know how they mix and affect soil or ourselves or, things like that. So I would go for the products that you can buy on the shelf with the instructions on how to use, how to mix, what to do, how to store, what to do if it gets in your eyes, all of these precautions. Dish soap, for example, often can contain a lot of ingredients that actually can be quite toxic to the waterways. And dish soap tends to be a detergent. Most dish soaps on the market are detergents. That means there's other ingredients in there that can cause harm to plants, which in this case is what we want. But if we're using it for other reasons like pest management, like bug pest management, they can actually wear out the plant tissues as well. Like the degreasers and things found in detergents. So there are, I'm not going to try to say this first ingredient, but it can cause acute aquatic toxicity. There we go. This second one is a likely human carcinogen and a groundwater contaminant. And this third one, triclosan, I don't know how to say it, can cause acute aquatic toxicity as well. Salt is a common DIY pest weed management ingredient. Salt, there are some products on the shelf that do have salt in them. Salt can only be beneficial for weed management if it's, if there's enough irrigation or rain to move the salt through the soil. But if we're just dumping, salt, a lot of salt on a plant that's not getting, irrigated or not getting rained on later, we could be damaging the soil. We're most likely damaging the soil. So I would try to avoid salt in general. It can cause problems to the worms and other soil organisms. And then vinegar. I see vinegar on every shelf in the herbicide aisle. Vinegar actually has a higher, that caution word we saw on the front label of that other product. It's actually, I believe it's danger is the next level up, and that's on the vinegar weed killers, because vinegar is actually more problematic acutely to like the person who is applying it than most other synthetic weed killers as well. So when we're using vinegar, we're using extreme caution. The vinegar that you use in your house to like make salad dressings and things is 5% acetic acid. And then I think usually the ones used for like household cleaners can be around 11%. 11% can burn skin and cause eye damage. And then I'm seeing on the shelf 20 to 30% horticultural vinegar for weed killers. At that level, it's corrosive to metals and cause blindness. So we are using extreme caution when using vinegar as a weed killer. I'm not saying that it's more toxic than other products. It is less toxic in the long run because it does break down quickly, but it is quite dangerous to the applicator and anyone who might be in the area. So we're never applying if there's drift. We're going to use full PPE with eye covering, face covering, and we want to make sure anything that we have on, we're not transferring that vinegar to something else because it can even corrode metals. One DIY weed killer that I will recommend is boiling water. Great for getting rid of weeds and cracks. And it's the same idea as that steamer or that that torch, but of course has less of a risk for wildfires. Just get your electric kettle, boil up some water, run out and dump it on the cracks. It might take a couple of applications, but it will break down those plants. All right, we're almost there. Just a couple more resources that you do have these, you will get these links in a PDF sent to you, but OMRI is they rate pesticides. So you might see the OMRI label on certain pesticides. But you can go to their website and learn more about different pesticides. I love the National Pesticide Information Center. Has really easy to read information about active ingredients, how it works, how if it's toxic to aquatic life, things like that. And it breaks down quickly. Again, the weed photo gallery from UCIPM, great way to learn about the weeds that you might have and how to change the environment to, make it less pleasant for them, harder for them to grow. The Our Water, Our World fact sheets. We have the weed fact sheet over here along with a few others, but you can find that at ourwaterourworld.org. And yeah, so remember, weeds are flowers too once you get to know them. So get to know your weeds. Maybe they're not that bad. And then I'm going to call up Paige again to give the last couple of slides.
Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you for all the wonderful information that we learned. Just checking that you can see me. Can you give you a thumbs up?
Well, kind of.
See?
Well, no, they're behind the window, but yeah.
Okay, great. So to connect with Flows to Bay, we're really active on our Facebook as well as our Instagram. We'd love to announce when we do our next webinar, such as this great collaboration with the Arboretum Society. We give stormwater pollution prevention tips and various other types of tips, so you can follow us on there to stay connected. Next slide, Charlotte.
Can you put them up?
And the one after.
Yeah, there we go.
Awesome. So we're really excited to be launching for the third time our very successful bulk rain barrel program. This is where you could have a very discounted 2 rain barrels, very high quality for the rain barrel themselves. And we've just had great success the last 2 years. So we're really excited that folks will be, again, able to get very discounted rain barrels and apply relevant rebates so that the rain barrel can basically be free after you apply the relevant rebates. So we love offering this to our county residents and are really excited that over 3,274 rain barrels have been installed to date in San Mateo County under the rebate. So we would love for you to join our rain barrel movement and be able to harvest and keep great water upcoming when all the rains come. Next slide. And to stay up to date on this specific program, you, as mentioned, can follow us on social media, but we'll also be announcing in our e-newsletter when we'll be launching it. So you could sign up flowstobay.org/newsletter. We also keep our newsletter up to date with any other events and tips that we are involved in. We also have a really stock-loaded webpage that discusses the rebate, so you could check your eligibility and just discuss the benefits of rain barrels. So that's flowstobay.org/bulk rain barrel program, and you have hyphens in between those words. And if you have any questions about what I just discussed or anything else about Flows to Bay or anything related to stormwater, we keep our inbox managed well. It's info@flowstobay.org. And next slide. I'll hand it back to Charlotte because she's been our wonderful presenter during the program, and she can express how you can get connected with her.
Yeah, thanks, Paige. Yeah, feel free to reach out to Flows to Bay. And then if you need to reach out, if you'd like to reach out to me, my contact info is there. And also the Our Water, Our World Instagram is @ourwaterourworld. We're usually sharing upcoming events and things like that as well, but sometimes tips as well. And my Instagram is earth.ally. I have to be more active on it, but I do share upcoming events that I'm doing. Did you want to chime in again?
Are there any more questions?
Well, I can
Online,
stick
Kara?
around after for questions.
Pardon?
If you want to give, I'll stick around after for questions if you
Okay, no,
want
I'm
to
just,
check in.
yeah.
There's one comment from Shauna.
Oh, Darshana, wow. gave a great, let's see, Mary Reynolds is doing work in the UK to encourage folks to get some portion of their land to go wild, whatever comes up from the seed bank and the soil, which in our area may require at first some mowing of the invasive European grasses, which outcompete our native plants, especially edges like along streets and highways, to allow the land to restore itself and support native insects, birds, and wildlife. Found her Facebook and follow her work, which she calls Art Acts of Restorative Kindness. And it looks like their book is called The Gardening Awakening, Designs to Nurture Our Land and Ourselves. Sounds great, thank you.
Question.
Oh, yeah, Susan, I can stick around for questions
Okay.
too. Okay.
So thank you to both Charlotte and Paige for an excellent and detailed presentation. I learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody else did too. In a few days, you will be emailed a link to a recording of the presentation and an evaluation form. Any unanswered questions can be addressed at that time. We will appreciate feedback on what worked and where we can improve, and for suggestions for future programs. Please join us on October 1. Our program will be a succulent topped pumpkin workshop. There are still a few in-person spaces available, and also available to participate on Zoom. The fee is $25 per pumpkin for Arboretum Society members and $35 for non-members. You purchase a 6 to 8 inch wide pumpkin, and we will supply you with all the materials you need to decorate and make a beautiful centerpiece. The Arboretum Society has a variety of volunteer opportunities, from greenhouse, nursery, education committee, and someone to help with the Zoom setups and more. Let us know if you're interested by completing the evaluation form, or you can email us at info@sanmataoarboretum.org, or leave a message at 650-579-0536. Huge thank you again to Charlotte and Paige for today's interesting program, and to Kevin, our president, for handling the technical part of our program. Thank you for joining us today. The program is now finished.